Emma stood at the door of Mr. Hayes' office, her breath shallow, heart racing. The cold morning air seemed to settle in the pit of her stomach as she heard her name called. "Emma, come in." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the doorknob, her pulse quickening. Inside, Mr. Hayes was seated, calm and composed, as if nothing was wrong. But his eyes were different today, detached, cold. Next to him stood Blake, his nephew, a young man in his mid-20s, fresh from college with a bright smile that didn't reach his eyes. Emma felt her stomach twist in confusion. "This is Blake," Mr. Hayes began, his voice clipped. "I've decided he'll be taking over the client accounts from now on." Emma froze. Her thoughts raced as she struggled to comprehend the words she had just heard. Replaced. Without warning, without reason. Her eyes flickered between Mr. Hayes and Blake, who stood there with a smile that barely concealed his nervousness. The betrayal was sharp, piercing. All those years of dedication, late nights and early mornings, it meant nothing now. She was just a cog in the machine, easily swapped out. Blake's presence felt like a slap in the face, and Emma fought to keep her composure. She had to say something, but her voice caught in her throat. Mr. Hayes' next words cut through the silence. "You'll be transitioning out soon, but Blake will be the one to take over." Emma's heart sank. There was no room for negotiation, no space for explanation. This was final. The door had closed on her career. Emma walked back to her desk, the weight of what had just happened pressing heavily on her chest. The office, once a place of pride and hard work, now felt alien. She could hear the chatter of her colleagues, but it all felt distant. The usual hustle and bustle of the morning seemed muted, drowned out by the loud beat of her heart. She sat down at her desk, staring at the computer screen, but the words blurred before her eyes. She could still feel the heat of Mr. Hayes' words, the sting of Blake's unfamiliar presence. Everything she had built here felt like it had been swept away in a single moment. As she typed aimlessly on the keyboard, Sarah walked over. She had seen the tension in the meeting, and now saw the impact it had on Emma. "What happened?" Sarah asked softly, sitting down next to Emma. Emma's throat tightened as she turned to her friend. "He replaced me with Blake." The words felt surreal, even as she said them. Sarah's eyes hardened. "That's not right. You've worked so hard for this. Don't let them get away with it." Emma took a deep breath. "I don't know what to do anymore." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm with you, Emma, whatever you decide." Emma nodded, the decision already forming in her mind. She wouldn't let this define her. Not now, not ever. Emma sat alone in her apartment that evening, the weight of the day still pressing down on her shoulders. The thought of leaving the company, the place where she had spent so much of her life, felt unbearable. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that staying would mean giving up on herself. She had always been the loyal employee, the one who stayed late, who went above and beyond. But now she was being treated like an afterthought. She couldn't allow herself to be discarded so easily. She thought of her clients, the ones who trusted her, who relied on her. She had built relationships with them, fought for their trust, and she wasn't going to let Blake walk in and take it all away. She grabbed her phone and called Lily. "I need to talk," she said when her sister picked up. The words spilled out, a rush of frustration, anger, and disbelief. "I'm being replaced, Lily, and I don't know what to do." Lily's voice was steady on the other end. "Emma, you're stronger than this. You've been through worse. Don't let him break you. Fight for what's yours." Emma took a deep breath. She wasn't ready to give up yet. The next day, Emma arrived at work early, determined to make it through the day. As she entered the office, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if everyone knew what had happened, but said nothing. Blake was already at his desk, busy with the new role he had been handed so easily. It felt like a slap to the face. She sat down at her desk, trying to keep her focus on the tasks ahead, but it was impossible. Every time she glanced at Blake, the weight of the situation grew heavier. After a few hours, she decided to take action. She had to know where she stood, and if it meant confronting Mr. Hayes again, then so be it. She stood up and walked toward his office. Her heartbeat quickened, but she refused to let fear control her. It was time to face the man who had betrayed her. Emma stood in front of Mr. Hayes' office door, her hand on the doorknob. The decision to confront him was made. She had to know why he had done this to her. With a deep breath, she entered without knocking. Mr. Hayes looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he began, "what's this about?" She felt the weight of his gaze, but she wasn't backing down. "I need to know why you replaced me," she demanded. The words came out colder than she expected, but the anger and hurt were too strong to mask. Mr. Hayes leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "It's business, Emma," he said bluntly. "Blake is the future. You're not." Her chest tightened. This was the answer she had feared, but it still hurt to hear it. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I've done everything for this company, and you can't just throw me away." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "This is the way things are now, Emma. Get used to it." She turned and walked out, her heart heavy, but her mind made up. She would not go down quietly. Emma sat on her couch, the hum of the city outside her window doing little to soothe the storm in her mind. She thought about her time at the company, about all the late nights spent perfecting presentations, the small victories that went unnoticed. It felt like a lifetime ago now. The harsh reality of being replaced hit her like a ton of bricks. Blake, with his lack of experience, was now leading the clients she had worked with for years. The betrayal stung, but what hurt the most was the feeling of being invisible. She had given everything to this company, and now she was nothing more than a footnote. It wasn't just about losing her job, it was about losing her sense of purpose. She reached for her phone, wanting to talk to someone, but she didn't know who to turn to. Sarah had been the one person who always had her back, but even now, Emma couldn't bring herself to call. It was too raw. She thought about how much of her life she had invested in this job, how she had sacrificed time with friends, time with herself. And for what? To be discarded like an old forgotten memo. She needed a moment to breathe, to regroup, to figure out what to do next. She couldn't stay stuck in the past, but it felt impossible to move forward. The next morning, Emma arrived at work early, hoping to gather her thoughts before the day began. The office was quieter than usual, almost too still. As she walked past the rows of empty cubicles, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of alienation. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. When she reached her desk, she sat down mechanically and stared at her computer screen. The cursor blinked at her, waiting for her next move, but she had no idea where to start. Then Sarah approached, her face drawn with concern. "Hey, Em," she said softly, sitting on the edge of Emma's desk. "You okay?" Emma looked up, forcing a smile, but it was weak. "Yeah, just trying to figure things out." Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Don't lie. I can see it on your face." Emma sighed. "You replaced me, Sarah." Just like that. Sarah's expression softened, and she placed a hand on Emma's arm. "You deserve better than this. You've been loyal. He doesn't get to throw you away like that." Emma nodded, but the pain in her chest wouldn't go away. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You fight. You don't let him win." Emma knew she had to do something, but the thought of challenging Mr. Hayes, of standing up to him, was terrifying. Later that day, Emma decided to take action. She couldn't just sit back and let this happen. Blake's rise to power was sudden, and it was all too easy for him. She had earned her place at the company, but he was handed it with no effort, no history, just because he was Mr. Hayes' nephew. Emma sat at her desk, typing out an email to one of her clients, explaining that she was no longer with the company, but that they could still expect the same level of dedication from her, should they want to continue working together. The words felt like a declaration of independence, a way to reclaim control over her life. She didn't wait long before hitting send. She had no idea how her clients would respond, but she knew it was a risk worth taking. As she leaned back in her chair, her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "I'm behind you. Whatever you need, just say the word." Emma felt a flicker of hope. This was the beginning of something new. Even if it didn't work out, at least she was doing something. She wasn't going to let Mr. Hayes win, not without a fight. The next morning, Emma was greeted with the news that Blake would be leading a meeting with a major client. The thought of him representing the company, taking charge of the accounts she had spent years building, made her stomach churn. She couldn't sit by and watch this happen. She had to act, and quickly. As Blake left for the meeting, Emma slipped into his office, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and picked up his phone, dialing the client's number. Her pulse raced as she waited for the line to connect. "Hello?" The voice on the other end said, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. It was one of the clients she had worked with closely. "Hi, it's Emma," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I just wanted to make sure you're aware that I'm no longer with the company, but I'll be available to continue working with you directly if you'd like." The line was silent for a moment, and Emma's heart hammered in her chest. Then the voice replied, "Emma, we've always trusted you. We'll follow you wherever you go." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she fought to hold them back. This was her first victory. She had taken the first step in reclaiming what was rightfully hers. After the call, Emma felt a rush of relief mixed with excitement. It was just the beginning, but it felt like she had taken control of her life again. The satisfaction of knowing that her clients still valued her, that they would follow her, gave her the strength to keep moving forward. She spent the rest of the day working on a plan, figuring out how she would approach the next steps. She knew she couldn't just walk away from everything, not yet at least. She would need to find a way to build something on her own, something that would allow her to work with the people who had supported her all these years. She began drafting a business plan, listing out what she would need: a website, a network of clients, a team. It seemed daunting, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt hopeful. She wasn't just going to be another casualty of Mr. Hayes' betrayal. She was going to build something of her own, and this was just the beginning. The following week was a whirlwind. Emma threw herself into her new venture, determined to make it work. She had sent out emails, contacted old clients, and began building a network from scratch. Every day felt like an uphill battle, but there was a sense of purpose in each step she took. The world outside her small apartment had become a blur as she spent hours refining her business plan, researching competitors, and reaching out to potential clients. Every time she received a response, her heart skipped a beat. Some were curious, some were hesitant, but there was always a glimmer of hope. One morning, as she reviewed a client's request for a proposal, she received a call from Sarah. "I've been hearing rumors, Em. Mr. Hayes is panicking. He's looking for new clients to replace the ones you took with you." Emma's blood ran cold. She had expected retaliation, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. She leaned back in her chair, the weight of the situation pressing on her chest. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice full of concern. Emma took a deep breath. "I won't let him destroy everything I've worked for. I'm going to keep going. I have no other choice." Sarah's voice softened. "Just remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm with you." Emma smiled, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. She wasn't going to let Mr. Hayes win. As the days went on, Emma's plans slowly started to come together. Her clients began responding positively, and she even managed to secure a few new ones. But with each new success came a mounting sense of anxiety. She knew that Mr. Hayes wouldn't just let her walk away unscathed. His empire was built on control, and Emma was a threat to that. One afternoon, as she was finalizing a proposal, she received an email notification. It was from an unknown address, but the subject line made her stomach drop. "Your clients are leaving you." She hesitated before opening it. The email was a thinly veiled threat from Mr. Hayes' legal team, warning her about the potential legal ramifications of poaching clients. Her hands shook as she read through the letter, her heart pounding in her chest. The message was clear. They weren't going to let her go without a fight. She wasn't surprised, but the fear gnawed at her nonetheless. She could feel the walls closing in, the pressure mounting. But as she read through the email again, something shifted. They couldn't touch her if she played her cards right. She wasn't going to back down. The stakes had been raised, but Emma was determined to see it through. The following morning, Emma walked into the office for the first time in over a week. The tension in the air was palpable. She could feel the eyes of her coworkers on her, whispering behind her back. They knew she was the one who had taken the clients, and they knew why. But none of them dared to approach her directly. As she passed by Blake's desk, she couldn't help but feel a rush of anger. He had no idea what she was going through, what he had cost her. He was still riding the coattails of his family connection, unscathed by the storm that was brewing. But she didn't have the luxury of sitting back and waiting for things to play out. She had to keep moving forward, despite the threat looming over her. She walked straight to Mr. Hayes' office, her mind made up. It was time to confront him directly. She knocked once before entering, her heart racing. Mr. Hayes looked up from his desk, a smile spreading across his face, but it was cold. "Emma, nice to see you," he said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "How can I help you today?" She could feel the bile rising in her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm here to talk about the email you sent me." His smile faltered slightly, but he didn't flinch. "Ah, yes, the legal matter. I'm sure we'll be able to sort things out." Emma stepped closer to his desk, her resolve firm. "No, Mr. Hayes. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to make it clear that I'm not going anywhere. You won't silence me." The confrontation with Mr. Hayes left Emma shaken, but it also fueled her resolve. She knew the battle was far from over. She couldn't afford to let him intimidate her. After the meeting, Emma spent hours going over her business plan again, making sure every detail was perfect. She couldn't afford any mistakes now. The weight of the threat from Mr. Hayes' legal team still loomed over her. But she couldn't let fear control her. She had to push forward, no matter the cost. As the days passed, Emma received more and more support from her clients. Word of mouth began to spread, and soon she was managing an impressive list of accounts. It wasn't just about the clients she had taken with her. It was about the reputation she had built. She knew she was capable of more than Mr. Hayes had ever given her credit for. Every new contract she secured felt like a small victory. She wasn't just rebuilding what had been taken from her. She was building something better, something entirely her own. But the legal threats kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. It was clear Mr. Hayes was not going to back down, and neither was she. One night after another long day of work, Emma received a call that made her stomach churn. It was from Sarah, who sounded worried. You need to hear this. I've just spoken to someone at the company, and they said Mr. Hayes is planning to send someone to your apartment tomorrow to intimidate you." The words hung in the air, thick with danger. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had known Mr. Hayes was ruthless, but this crossed a line. "What? Who's coming?" Emma asked, her voice tight with fear. "I don't know, but they're sending someone to make you back down. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to be blindsided." Emma swallowed hard, her hands gripping the phone tightly. "Thanks for telling me, Sarah. I'll handle it." As she hung up, Emma felt a surge of anger rise up in her. She wasn't going to be intimidated. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let fear control her. She picked up her phone and texted a few of her clients, letting them know what was happening. "This isn't just about me anymore," she thought. "This is about taking back control." The next morning, Emma was on edge. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of what Mr. Hayes might do next. The threat of someone coming to her apartment still lingered, making her heart pound in her chest. But Emma wasn't going to let fear stop her. She had to keep moving forward. As she entered the office that morning, she saw Mr. Hayes in the hallway, speaking to someone Emma didn't recognize. The stranger's suit was sharp, his demeanor cold. He was carrying a briefcase, and there was something unsettling about the way he looked at Emma. She couldn't shake the feeling that this man was the one sent to intimidate her. As she walked past them, she caught Mr. Hayes' eye. He gave her a subtle nod, almost like a warning. "We'll deal with this soon, Emma," he said, his voice low, but his tone cold and final. Emma's stomach twisted. She couldn't understand why he was so determined to break her, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't back down now. She couldn't let him win. She walked past them, her heart beating in her ears. The game had changed, but she wasn't ready to lose. Later that afternoon, Emma received a call from an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering, her heart pounding. When she picked up, a voice on the other end said, "Emma, this is Marcus from Hayes Enterprises. I think we need to have a conversation." Emma's stomach dropped. She had been expecting a confrontation, but she hadn't anticipated it would come so soon. "What do you want, Marcus?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Hayes wants to settle this. He's willing to negotiate. He doesn't want this to escalate any further." Emma clenched her jaw. "I'm not negotiating with him," she said firmly. Marcus seemed unfazed. "I think you'll change your mind when you hear the terms." He went on to explain that Mr. Hayes was offering a financial settlement in exchange for Emma agreeing to stop working with the clients she had taken. The offer was tempting, too tempting. But Emma's gut told her it was a trap. She had spent so long building this, and now he was trying to buy her off. "I'll think about it," Emma said, though she already knew the answer. She wasn't about to sell her soul for a payout. Mr. Hayes was underestimating her, and that was his mistake. Emma spent the rest of the day replaying Marcus' words in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Mr. Hayes was hiding something. She had come too far to back down now, but the temptation of the settlement was undeniable. As she mulled over her options, she received an unexpected message from one of her old colleagues, Karen. The message read, "Emma, I don't know if you know this, but Mr. Hayes isn't exactly who he says he is. There are some shady things going on behind the scenes, and I think you need to be careful." The message sent a chill down her spine. She had always trusted Mr. Hayes, but now everything was beginning to look different. Had she been blind to his true nature all along? Emma felt a growing sense of betrayal. She decided to meet with Karen the next day to hear more. She knew there was more to the story, and she needed to uncover the truth. Whatever Mr. Hayes was hiding, Emma was going to find out. The stakes had just been raised. The next day, Emma met with Karen in a small, dimly lit cafe. Karen looked uneasy, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone might be watching them. "What's going on, Karen?" Emma asked, her voice low. Karen took a deep breath and leaned in. "You need to know this, Emma. Mr. Hayes isn't just a businessman. He's involved in some pretty shady dealings. Things that could ruin him if they came to light." Emma's heart raced. "What kind of things?" Karen hesitated before speaking. "I don't have all the details, but I've seen some of the financials. He's been cooking the books, hiding money, using the company for personal gain." Emma's mind was spinning. She had never suspected anything like this. "But why didn't you say anything?" she asked, feeling betrayed. Karen lowered her voice. "I was too scared, Emma. But now I'm not. He's done enough damage, and I don't want to be complicit anymore." Emma felt a wave of anger rise up within her. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about standing up for what was right. She wasn't going to let Mr. Hayes get away with it. She had the power to bring him down, and now she had the proof she needed. Armed with this new information, Emma knew what she had to do. She couldn't let Mr. Hayes continue his shady dealings, and she couldn't let him silence her. That evening, she called Sarah to tell her what she had learned. "I have to take him down, Sarah," Emma said, her voice steady. "Can't just walk away from this. I need to make sure he's held accountable." Sarah's voice was filled with concern. "Are you sure, Em? This could get dangerous." Emma's response was firm. "I'm not afraid of him anymore. I know what I'm up against, but I'm ready to fight." The weight of her decision settled in her chest, but it was a weight she was willing to carry. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for what was right. She had the evidence she needed, and it was time to make her move. Emma wasn't going to let Mr. Hayes continue to manipulate everyone. The truth would come out no matter what. Emma walked into Mr. Hayes' office with Blake at her side, the weight of their evidence heavy in her hands. She placed the documents on his desk, her voice unwavering. "This is over. You're done, Mr. Hayes." He remained calm, but his eyes flickered with panic as Emma exposed his financial fraud and manipulations. Blake stood firmly by her, finally ready to stand up to his uncle. "This isn't just about business. You've ruined people's lives," Emma said, her voice rising. Mr. Hayes tried to dismiss them, but the truth was out now. Emma had fought for this moment, and she wasn't backing down. With the documents in hand, Emma and Blake walked out of the office, knowing their next move was critical. As they stepped outside into the fresh air, Blake spoke quietly. "It's done. There's no turning back now?" Emma nodded, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. She had taken the fight to Mr. Hayes, and now she had the power. With every step they took, Emma felt more certain that this battle was hers to win. She had exposed the lies, and now the world would know the truth. Later that evening, Emma received word that the legal case against Mr. Hayes was moving forward. His empire was crumbling, and the evidence they had gathered was irrefutable. As she sat in her apartment, reflecting on the day's events, she realized that her fight wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about justice for everyone Mr. Hayes had wronged. She thought of her clients, her friends, and her own personal growth. This wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something greater. With the momentum on her side, Emma knew the final piece was just within reach. The following days were a blur of meetings, documents, and final preparations. She knew the public was starting to take notice of her story, but she had to stay focused. One evening, she received a message. "Mr. Hayes is trying to settle." It was tempting, but Emma knew better. This wasn't about money. It was about accountability. "I won't settle," she texted back. "It's time for him to face the truth." After a tense few weeks, the trial had arrived. As Emma sat in the courtroom, she could feel the energy in the air. The evidence was clear, the witnesses were on her side, and Mr. Hayes could no longer deny the truth. The judge read the verdict, "Guilty." Emma let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. For the first time, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She had won. Mr. Hayes would pay for his actions, and Emma could finally look forward to a future built on integrity. Months after the trial, Emma stood on the balcony of her new office, overlooking the city. Her business was thriving, and the weight of Mr. Hayes' betrayal was slowly being replaced by the satisfaction of success. She had built something meaningful from the ashes of what he had destroyed. Her clients who had stuck with her were loyal, and Emma had cultivated a network of professionals who believed in her. As she looked at the skyline, Emma couldn't help but smile. She had fought for her freedom, and now she was free. Every day was a reminder of her strength. The road had been long and painful, but the reward was worth it. Emma had reclaimed control over her life and was no longer defined by Mr. Hayes or the company. She was her own person now, and the future was hers to shape. One day, as Emma was wrapping up a meeting, she received a call from Lily. "I'm proud of you, Em. You've really done it," her sister said. Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of her sister's support. "It's been a journey, but I'm finally at peace," Emma replied. The sense of fulfillment was a quiet but powerful one. No longer was she worried about being replaced or betrayed. She had built her future, brick by brick. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was about reclaiming her life. Emma ended the call and walked out of her office, taking in a deep breath. She had conquered every obstacle, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly free. A few weeks later, Emma was invited to speak at a business conference. As she stood in front of the crowd, she could feel the weight of everything she had been through. She had built this from the ground up, and now she was inspiring others with her story. "It's not about the battles you fight. It's about how you rise from the ashes of defeat," Emma said into the microphone. The audience applauded, and she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced betrayal, fear, and uncertainty, but she had overcome them all. Now, she was a beacon of strength and resilience, sharing her journey with others. One evening, Emma sat at her desk, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. The road had been long, filled with struggles and obstacles, but she had made it. She was no longer haunted by the fear of being replaced or forgotten. She had taken control of her destiny, and it had paid off. As she closed her laptop for the night, she looked out at the city once more. It was a new chapter, one where she had the power to shape her future, free from the chains of her past. With a sense of finality, Emma knew that she had come full circle. As the final chapter of her story unfolded, Emma realized that her greatest triumph wasn't her business or her success. It was the fact that she had stayed true to herself. She had fought for what was right, and in the process had found her voice. With each new day, she knew she was ready for whatever the future held, for she was no longer defined by anyone else's expectations. She had created her own path, and it was hers to walk. As Emma stood on the rooftop of her new office building, looking out over the sprawling city below, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with betrayal, loss, and moments of doubt. But now, she had finally emerged stronger. The skyline stretched out before her, a symbol of everything she had built and everything still to come. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged victorious. The weight of the years she had spent in the corporate grind now felt like a distant memory. With a deep breath, Emma knew that this was just the beginning of her new life. A life she had carved out with her own hands. As Emma walked away from the edge of the rooftop, she realized how far she had come. The past was behind her, and she was no longer defined by it. She had fought for her freedom, her dignity, and her future. As she made her way back inside, she smiled softly to herself. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find yourself, she thought. It was a simple realization, but one that would stay with her forever. The journey had been hard, but it had shaped her into the person she was always meant to be. Emma had learned that strength wasn't just about surviving the storms. It was about rising above them, rebuilding, and never letting the past dictate who you become. She wasn't just a survivor of betrayal, she was the architect of her own success. As she looked at the horizon, she realized that this was her moment, the moment she had fought for, earned, and finally achieved. There was no going back, only forward. With each passing day, Emma knew that the past would always be a part of her, but it would no longer define her. She had broken free from the chains of her former life, from the betrayal and the heartache. As she took her first steps toward the future, she knew that the journey ahead would be hers to shape, to mold, and to define. There was no limit to what she could achieve now, and the future was wide open. The final thought lingered in Emma's mind. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself, but when you find who you truly are, the world becomes limitless. She looked at the horizon once more, and for the first time in a long time, she was at peace. The past had shaped her, but it no longer held her captive. The world was hers for the taking.